So there's a group in Guatemala, in Zacatepeques, called Afedes. It's a group of young indigenous women, Maya Caquichel, women who formed this group in the early 2000s. No, actually, in 1995 or so, they formed this group to really look at economic development. Really, it is from a small community in Chimaltenango that was going through a really rough time. Most of the people were unemployed. There was very few formal sector jobs, and so a group of women came together and they said, let's start like a loan savings and credit group, microcredit group essentially. And so for about 5 or 6 years, this group led by young indigenous women made lots of loans, did really good. They had a lot of money in circulation, repayment rates were really high, and they did something that is so uniquely, in my opinion, just the power of community groups, right? Just so uniquely something you don't see in large NGOs and large externally funded groups. They started to notice that as the repayment rates were growing and as there was more money in circulation in the community, the malnutrition rates were getting higher, and that the women were actually, the rates of complaints of domestic violence were increasing. And so they did a whole like listening exercise and a learning exercise with the community to figure out what's actually going on, what's the root cause. This is also something that I really pride our work on, is that we work with groups that really care about the root causes, not just the symptoms, right? Because symptomatically everything looked great. All the funders were happy. They were raising money from Europe and the US, because who doesn't love a good repayment rate in a microcredit program? And then suddenly they were like, something's really wrong. And when they did this study, they found that most women were taking out loans under duress from fathers or brothers or husbands. And even though they had more money in circulation, they actually had no decision-making power. And in fact, as there were more microcredit groups popping up, they were borrowing from one place to repay the other. And the whole thing was happening with women getting higher in debt, not being able to really afford to actually even maintain that. And then the husbands were kind of pushing them to get more and more and more. And in the meantime, they're getting beaten up at the household level and feeling like they had no say in the money that they were getting. So the group decided to actually do away with its microcredit program that was fully funded, and decided instead to open a school of political education and agroecology, because one of the other root cause analyses was that actually more flow of funding meant there was more consumer product being dumped into the villages, which meant that actually the communities were now didn't have time to make tortillas, and they were like now eating GM tortillas, and that was actually leading to obesity. And so they traced the whole thing, and they were like, our health outcomes are getting worse, and actually we don't have any time to make food, grow food, so we're just buying food and who knows what we're consuming. So all of this. So they decided, well, one of the ways we need to recuperate what we know to be true from a health and nutrition and well-being perspective is to actually learn to grow food again. And then secondarily, that women have to learn to assert some decision-making power in the household, no matter what the obstacles in their favor. So they went from hundreds of members in this successful microcredit program to being able to accommodate 10 or 15 or 20 women at a time in this school. So all the funders were like, peace out. And IDEX had a huge moment. This is about 8 or 9 years ago. We had a huge moment of pause. We had to be like, what are we going to do? They're about to do away with the tried and tested and are going to experiment with this whole new thing and pretty political thing. And it hasn't been done yet. Do we want our funding to go towards it? And we had a whole lot of internal process around it. This is before my time, but I'm really proud of the fact that as an organization we made a decision to stay the course, and it was the moment of truth for us, right? We say our value is to truly allow for communities to self-determine their future. Here's the moment. This organization believes that this is how it needs to adapt and change. Are we going to be behind them, or are we now going to say, So in that moment, we decided to stick it out, and we were the only funder that supported them through this whole shift and transition. There's so much to say about how powerful the School of Political Education has been at a very tactical day-to-day level. This is a group of young Indigenous women that are just an inspiration to all of Guatemala and Mesoamerica. They've managed to be really lead players in passing the anti-femicide law. The community is so incredibly powerful and healthy and self-sufficient. But what they also took on along the way, they took on, as one of their leader, Amaryllis Guamuk, will often tell you, she'll say, along the way, we realized we had taken on patriarchy, we'd taken on church, we had taken on capitalism, and we were actually saying we're going to find a solution to all of this. And we realized we couldn't do it without men. So even though we were a women's group, we had to really get our brothers and fathers and husbands involved. And now the school actually is also a school for families. So they're starting young. So it's not just targeting women, but it's actually whole families that go through the training. But this whole process has taken 12 years, right? And they have elected women officials to power, locally and regionally. I mean, so it's been, profound shift, but it took about 10 years of just taking a leap of faith and saying we have to practice what we preach and learn from it.